He poses as big a menace as the German army did in World War II. The invasion is on, and I appeal to everybody to, wherever you see a toad, have no hesitation running over and killing the monster.
In just 70 years, they have pillaged their way through the outback.
They're not native to Australia, but now there are millions. The descendants of 100 toads which were reported in 1935 in an attempt to enjoy sugarcane.
Howdy, and welcome to the Native Naturalist channel, where on today's video we're going to be talking about a... Oh, actually, where is my... Forgot my chalk pen. Howdy, welcome back to the Native Naturalist channel, where on today's video we're going to be talking about a civil decision that was made in June of 1935 that would lead to one of the largest ecological disasters in Australia's history, and to this day impacts hundreds of native species within the land down under. Now, when you think of invasive species, depending on where you live, a few organisms may come to mind. You have the buckthorn of the Midwest, you have the kudzu of the South, and if you've been in any major water body within the United States, you've probably heard of zebra mussel. But today, we're here to talk about a species that, in the wake of its spread across the Commonwealth of Australia, the disdain for this species has transcended it from a conservation concern to a cultural war cry. The cane toad, or known by its scientific name of Rhinella marina, is a South American species that, once we get into the ecology and life history of this species, we'll get a better understanding of how it absolutely exploded in the land down south. But before we get into this ecological roller coaster, we actually need to take a step back and set the stage to 1862. Just 3 years after the establishment of the new colony in Queensland, you would see kind of the progression of what most new colonies would need. A legislative assembly, new schools, new towns, but more importantly, especially for our context, we need agriculture. They primarily were dominated by two different resources, wool and sugarcane. But kind of like with anything with agriculture, once you introduce a new crop or a new plant species to the area, you're going to start to see booms and other organisms that may rely on that. And in our case, we have sugarcane beetles. So we would have an explosion of beetles that would be detrimental to the cane crop, so the Queensland Bureau of Sugar would actually conduct surveys in this area to figure out what was really going on. And they figured out that there was two species that were kind of impacting this area. That's going to be the French's beetle and the grayback beetle. Now that we have a major industry that is going to be impacted, there was a push to kind of get this all figured out, because if not, there was going to be issues with, one of the major economic backbones collapsing, causing this entire colony to probably collapse as well. And that was start a search for the biological control. And that brings us to San Juan, Puerto Rico. 1932 would mark the 4th Congress of the International Society of Sugarcane Technologists, in which Raquel Dexter, which I could be completely slaughtering that, would present her research on cane toads, and specifically their diet and how they could be used as a biological control. And before we get to the two individuals that would be mediators slash representatives of Australia, we actually go to a representative of Hawaii, or I guess technically two representatives of Hawaii, that would kind of be the precursor to what would happen in Australia. Cyril Pemberton, who was an entomologist, and his boss, who was the owner of Oahu Sugar in Hawaii, would actually find Dexter's research kind of interesting, and they decided that they would implement her research in order to deal with their own issues that they had at their plantations. And so they would capture and release 2,000 of these cane toads on the Hawaiian plantation. And before we go on, I will get Pemberton this. He was pretty apprehensive to releasing all these toads and kind of wanted to do more research and study these toads in their host countries, but was overruled pretty quickly. And we don't have a ton of documentation on how it worked out. Based on how Australia turned out, probably didn't turn out too well. So we'll get to that. And now that we have that precursor that Hawaiian plantations also did this, now we can go to our Australian representatives, which is Arthur Bell, who was a plant pathologist turned acting director of the Bureau of Sugar's experiment stations, and Reginald Montgomery, who was originally a member of the Prickly Pear Board, and Rockhampton would eventually actually go and work at the Bureau of Sugar's experiment stations as well, which I'm pretty sure is where they both met up. Bell and Montgomery would actually go to Australia to Pemberton's cache and actually go ahead and pick up like 102 of these toads and get them exported over to Australia. And so now with these 202 toads in Australia in 1935, they would start to breed them in captivity and eventually get to 62,000 a little short of 2 years later in March of 1937. These thousands of toads would be progressively released into northern Queensland, which you'd be wondering why exactly, and mainly because of the fact that north of Queensland is kind of a humid area, which, you know, for these toads being in South America, it would make sense. And although the spread was slow, by 1959, you would have these toads decimate the East Coast, kind of where a lot of these dense forests reside within Australia. And by 2011, you would actually have an estimated population of over 200 million toads within Australia. And it wasn't even just about the quantity of the toads that were out there, but it was about the size because, you know, size matters. In 2023, at Conway National Park, rangers would find what they quoted as Toadzilla, which was at a size of 25 centimeters and 2.5 kilos, which, if you're not a communist, means that it was about the size of a standard tennis racket and then also about the weight of a six-pack of Busch Light. So it was a pretty big boy. You may be thinking to yourself like, yeah, that's a lot of toads, but I mean, how bad could it be, right? Well, the biggest problem was poisoning, and specifically bufotoxin. So with the cane toads, you would have a gland that's located near the back of the neck where these bufotoxins are produced. And they are a cause for a horrible time. Usually when you see dog owners and they freak out about having a toad, like a dog with a toad in its mouth, this is why. These bufotoxins can be either excreted through a defense measure or squirted into your eye, which actually horrifying, but can cause things ranging from increased salivation, vomiting, cardiac arrhythmia, or basically just your heart kind of being all out of whack, and sometimes death. So it's not a good time if you get this in your system and your eye, XYZ. And because of this toxin, we've actually seen a laundry list of different native species within Australia on the decline. For example, the yellow-spotted monitor. And before we get into the bright side, which I am very excited about, we probably need to dive a little bit more into why predators are struggling so much. So I mentioned the bufotoxins earlier, but let me draw something out for you. Okay, so now that I have this all drawn out, let's go through why these toads are such an issue. So as I mentioned earlier, bufotoxins. If you handle it roughly, or if you try to eat it, it's gonna squirt and it's gonna be a bad one. So as a predator, we have a predator right here. That takes adults off the table. And it takes juveniles off the table, because I'm pretty sure they also have a bufotoxin gland. I don't know how developed it is, but it's probably not a good time. So now we have eggs, and cool, like you would think, perfect. You just kind of nip the problem in the bud. You eat it while it's an egg, it's fine. Psych, the eggs are actually poisoned too. So we're kind of look, it's gonna lead to this predator dying, which I won't get into that. Anyways, like I said earlier, there are signs of hope. Initially, they were thinking of trapping, but with the sheer amount of toads that are kind of out and about and the chance for accidental bycatch, there was another thought of using a viral or bacterial pathogen in order to kind of spread over to these toads and have them die that way. But then you have spillover, which spillover is just a like virus or bacteria hopping from like species. So like from toad to toad, and in our case, like you have zoonotic spillover, which would be kind of like rabies, where it hops from raccoon to human. But yeah, so spillover made the bacteria and viral control a no-go. But we have seen some adaptation. So you have species like black kites that have actually been seen to flip over these toads and kind of go at their gutty works instead of trying to go for the back of their neck. And then we have things like the dolly toad, which kind of lead into this egg thing that I was talking about earlier. I kind of overstepped a little bit. There are some species that are able to kind of withstand the poison from the bufotoxin, which is also where we get into the meat ants. There are meat ants in Australia, which of course there are, why wouldn't there be? And they are actually able to withstand the poison as well, so we've seen them eat juvenile frogs. But this doesn't completely avoid this, it just means that there are small cases in which these two individuals can be, or I guess all three, can be circumvented and be dropped. And then we get into the human aspect, which we've actually seen some citizens take matters into their own hands.
Well, I really go out of my way to run over cane toads basically because I have a very profound love of the wildlife that occurs here naturally. If it was possible to remove them and totally eradicate them from Australia, and I was capable of doing it, I would spend a lifetime doing exactly that.
Dude, I'll never get tired of that clip. That clip is so funny. The poppy noises it made. From making cane toad purses to turning cane toads into cricket balls and golf balls, and also making them a vehicular manslaughter victim. Some of the Aussies have embraced their own methods of control. And this whole invasive species conversation has left just the scientific community and gone to the media, where there was a satirical documentary called Cane Toad, The Unnatural History, which honestly is one of my favorite pieces to come out of this whole thing, probably right ahead of the cane toad purses, which if you have 45 minutes to spare, you could probably just swap your doom scrolling for this documentary. I would highly recommend. And this documentary isn't the only thing that this conversation has bled into. We have children's books. We have, I guess, secondary media, which would be like YouTube and stuff like that I've talked about it, podcasts, etc. Even The Simpsons has released an episode about this cane toad epidemic. With all this being said, cane toads are just one of thousands of different species that have been displaced, doing what they do best: shaking the sheets and hitting the streets. And although it's easy to villainize these invasive species, because don't get me wrong, there's been plenty of times I've gone fishing and I've caught, you know, an Asian carp, and it's ruined my day. But we have to remember who brought these species here. And it's not only the job of people in the natural resource field or your politicians or your lawmakers. It's us as humans that have a job to ensure that we're protecting those who can't protect themselves. And so, if anything, this is just a reminder to wipe your boots, drain your boats, and leave no trace. And yeah, I want to thank you for watching today's video. I mean, I see it as a blessing whenever I get to have somebody who completely watches my video all the way through, because I know time is valuable. And yeah, this is a little bit of a different setup. I actually have stopped moving for work, and so now that I have a place, I thought, why not change the setup a little bit and see how people like it. So yeah, thank you again, and I'll see you on the flip side.